Hi guys, my name is Carrie and I wanted to make a video for anyone who might be struggling with anxiety. And I wanted to bring this up because it's something that I personally went through for years and it completely ruled my life, and now I'm completely on the other side of it, which is something that I never thought would happen. But I still have so many friends and so many colleagues who struggle with it on a daily basis. And while I'm not a doctor and I'm not a psychologist, let me just preface with that, I did see a psychologist while I was going through the thick of my anxiety disorder, and the information and the advice that he gave me to help handle it was invaluable. And again, this isn't to say that you shouldn't, go see a psychologist yourself if you think that might help, or if you're in a particularly bad case and you think you need medication to deal with it. This is definitely not substituting that. This is just some manageable things to do on your own at home to help you do it mind over matter. And again, that's not saying that any other way is good, bad, right, or wrong. This is just sort of my experience and how I overcame it personally at home, just in my own head. So again, not a doctor, but I just thought this was some great information that I received that really changed my life. And if I hadn't wrapped my head around what anxiety is with this information, then I guarantee I would still be struggling with it. So a little bit about my experience. I started having anxiety attacks, and you'll see why I put it in quotes later, when I was in college, but I didn't realize that that's what it was. After I would, go out for the night with friends, and I would come home, and, when you're out and you're partying and you're having a good time, and, you've had some drinks, everything feels great. You're running on adrenaline and, everyone is having a good time. And then you get home and all my friends would just pass out and go to sleep. And I would be up with this crazy insomnia, and I would feel this horrible, beating in my chest. And I couldn't go to sleep, and I felt miserable and so stressed and hot and awful. I didn't realize until later that it was because I hated that feeling of not being in control of my own body. So I later found out that alcohol is one of my triggers for anxiety, as it is for most people. I found that out for sure from talking to people. So I didn't realize it then. And then a few years later, I found myself smack dab in the middle of an awful, awful marriage. And it had been, bad for a while. And then he started drinking like crazy. And there were definitely things in our relationship that were more than just stress for me. It caused me this need to just get away, to grab my daughter and just flee and go to my parents' house and just get out of the environment of the house that I was living in with my ex-husband. And that's when it got really, really bad, the anxiety. But I didn't, again, realize that it was anxiety. So I went to my primary care and explained my symptoms, and then he referred me to a psychologist. And I met with my psychologist, and he determined that what I was going through was having quote unquote anxiety attacks. So that's sort of how I came into dealing with this in the beginning. And the reason that I keep putting it in air quotes is because one of the first things that my doctor told me was, don't call it an anxiety attack or a panic attack. Because when you call it that, when you label that, you are inferring that it's something that's happening to you, and it's not something that you can control. So it's not like epilepsy. It's not like having a seizure. That's something that happens to you physically that you have zero control over. You can't stop the symptoms. You can't prevent it as well as, we would like to. There's certain medications, certainly, but it's not a condition that you aren't in control of. When you have an anxiety attack, it is completely created by you in your head, and then it gives you physical symptoms. But the good news is, since it's created by you in your own head and then causes physical symptoms in your body, you can also stop it in your head so that it doesn't create physical symptoms, or so that you can stop those physical symptoms. So by now, I hope, everybody who is listening to this knows exactly whether or not you are struggling with anxiety. Struggling with anxiety isn't just like laying in bed worrying at night. It's not just thinking about, your to-do list tomorrow. That's just being an overthinker probably. But anxiety disorder is more, again, not a doctor, but It's more when you have the physical symptoms of something. Like a lot of the symptoms are getting really hot, having your heart beat really hard. It can feel like a heart attack sometimes, chest pains, feeling like that itchiness or tingling on the back of your neck and feeling really hot. I'm sure some of you are starting to feel it right now with me just talking about it, because I know when other people would talk about their anxiety, or when I would talk about my symptoms when I was in the middle of it, I would start to feel them because I was so worried about having it. It's so bad. So those are just some of them. Insomnia, certainly one. One of my worst symptoms is that from the heat and the anxiousness, and just the constant heart palpitations, I would get really nauseous. So I would almost throw up every single night from the severe nausea of the crazy anxiety that I was having when I was in that place. And so those are some of the symptoms. And when we identified that with my doctor, he said, you have to realize that all that is, all of those symptoms that anybody suffers from anxiety is just misplaced adrenaline. So what causes an anxiety attack is your body's biological fight or flight response. And that's basically when there's like a bad guy coming to get you, or you're in some moment where you need to defend yourself or protect your family or something. Your body sends a signal, or your mind sends a signal to your body that gives you a burst of adrenaline, like when you're getting ready to, run track, or when you're getting ready to start a Spartan race, or whatever it may be. When you see your kid fall in the pool, you're going to run. Like that reaction, that adrenaline burst that helps moms lift cars off their babies, that is your fight or flight response. And all that's happening is that your body is getting a burst of adrenaline in that moment that it doesn't really need. Because most of the time when people have anxiety attacks, they are usually just like laying in bed, or they're just sitting, someplace completely comfortable, or maybe they're at work, but they're certainly not in a place where they're like running from a murderer. So that's just adrenaline that you don't need. And adrenaline isn't uncomfortable if you need it. So when you're in the stands cheering on your favorite football team, the adrenaline isn't uncomfortable because you're standing there, your arms are going, you're shouting. So it feels normal in your body, and your body's moving and reacting to it. So it doesn't feel uncomfortable. But when you're just laying in bed and worrying about a job interview, or worrying about having an anxiety attack, or worrying about whether you're going to make your flight tomorrow morning, your body doesn't need the adrenaline, because you don't need to fight and you don't need to run anywhere. You just need to calm down. So that's why it feels so uncomfortable. And that misplaced adrenaline causes the heart palpitations and the sweating and the stuff on the back of your neck that feels awful, and the nausea and everything else that comes with it, and just that awful suspended feeling that you feel. And sometimes you can have what I think he called it, this was many years ago, but like a suspended anticipatory state of anxiety. So sometimes you're not in a full-blown, like in the heat of it where you need a fan and all that stuff. Sometimes you're just feel a little, I feel like I might get anxiety. And that can go on for days at a time. And that is awful, awful, awful. So he told me to stop calling it an anxiety attack, because it's not something that's happening to me. It's not something that's happening to you out of your control. You created that through something that triggered in your mind a fight or flight response to give you that adrenaline. So instead of calling it anxiety, from now on, we're just going to call it adrenaline. And I might accidentally call it anxiety attack because I'm not in a place where that stresses me out anymore. But I need you to promise that you're going to only call it adrenaline from now on, because that's all it is. And once you realize that it's just a biological, physiological reaction in your body that you are creating, then it can help you manage it more and help you be less afraid of it. Because let's be honest, it's scary having anxiety, not knowing when it's going to happen. So just call it adrenaline instead of anxiety, and then hopefully that will help normalize it a little bit more and help you wrap your mind around it. So call it adrenaline. So one of the things about adrenaline is, like I said, it's from the fight or flight response. So what that is something that he helped me to deal with. It was just thinking of it as your brain, like sending a message to your body to create adrenaline. And that's what's causing you to sweat and all that other stuff. So just pretend when you start to feel it, or when you're worried about having it, that you are taking a pair of scissors and cutting that thread. You're cutting the message from your brain to your body, because you don't need adrenaline. You're laying in your bed and you're thinking about your flight tomorrow morning, or you're meeting with your boss, or whatever it may be, and you don't need the adrenaline. So just sort of be like, hey body, I don't need it. Thanks anyway, brain. I appreciate what you're trying to do for me, but I don't need that adrenaline right now. So I'm just going to cut off that response. I don't need it. You need to normalize it. You need to make it not so stressful, like it's this big crazy thing that you're never going to overcome and you need to pop a Xanax. I'm not saying anything's wrong with that. I purposely went the route of no meds because I'm stubborn and I wanted to overcome it mind over matter. I wanted to fix the problem and not mask the symptoms. And again, certain people have different things that are going along with anxiety, like depression, which I had a little bit of, but it really wasn't as severe as the anxiety. And as soon as I removed myself from my marriage, the depression part went away. So, again, that's not to say that you shouldn't, be talking to your doctor about using medication to control any issues that you're having as well. But for me personally, I wanted to attack what was causing the issue so that I could be done with it forever. And I didn't have to constantly be going to a medication to make me feel better, but that I was fixing it from the source. So that's why I dug so deep into what is this? Why is my body doing this? And how can I control it? So again, just say, I don't need that adrenaline, cut it off. And another thing is identifying your triggers. So everybody has triggers for anxiety. Some people have one, some people have a million. Mine started in college with alcohol. I didn't know it, but that feeling of being drunk, I hated that feeling. I wanted it to go away. I wanted to be able to feel normal and go to sleep regularly and all that. So I hated that. So when I realized that was one of my triggers, I stopped drinking. I wasn't an excessive drinker anyway, but I even just like having half a drink would start to make me feel buzzed. And then I would start to get nervous. Oh no, am I going to get drunk? Even though I had half a beer. So it just wasn't worth it to me at that point. And I wasn't really a crazy drinker anyway before, but it wasn't worth it to me. And of course, the calories weren't worth it and all that. And then I was also in the midst of a relationship with somebody who drank more frequently than I was comfortable with. So unfortunately, I could remove the alcohol from my life, but that was still happening in my marriage. So I realized very soon after talking to my psychologist that my ex was also a trigger, and the way that he treated me and the way that we interacted was a huge trigger. So even though the marriage was already very much coming to an end, we officially went forward with separating, and I moved out with my daughter, and that helped remove that trigger immensely. So I removed that trigger. I removed the alcohol trigger. I removed my ex-husband trigger. And the problem was it had gotten to the point where the fear of having anxiety, of having adrenaline, was a trigger now, because I had gone through having it for so long and feeling so sick and going to the ER because I thought I was dying and I was having vertigo and I might have sepsis and all this crazy stuff that it makes you a hypochondriac over. I was now having the fear of having that adrenaline, that feeling, be a trigger now. So even though I would be laying in bed at night, I didn't have a meeting the next morning, I didn't have a flight, I was in my new apartment with my baby girl, I hadn't drank, nobody else in the house had drank, and I was still getting ready, like getting that anticipatory anxiety feeling and getting that feeling, and I would still have that adrenaline. And I talked to my psychologist about it, and he said, well, now your new trigger, unfortunately, because you've suffered from this for so long, is now your fear of having it happen to you is making it happen. So mine usually happen at night. Sorry, this AC unit just kicked on. Having it happen at night is what really created a trigger for me of fear of not getting enough sleep, fear of what if I'm just laying here all night and I'm feeling totally miserable. So what I realized was that I needed to fix it in my mind, and not just like by cutting it off, but realizing, I call it Jedi mind tricks that I was doing to myself. So basically, because you create this in your head, because you're creating an unnecessary rush of adrenaline to your system while you're just laying in bed or sitting on the couch or driving or wherever you are, you can also, the excellent news there is that you can also stop it. You can stop that signal immediately by talking yourself through it in your head and making yourself realize that you don't need that adrenaline. And all it is a burst of adrenaline, and you don't need it. So there's nothing to stress about. You don't need to go do yoga. And I know there's all these things where people are like, don't have too much caffeine and maybe go do yoga or exercise. I do think exercise will help. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a fitness coach, but because then the adrenaline is being used for something. So then you use it, you burn off the adrenaline, and then you move on. So I do think that exercise would help. But for me, the nausea was so bad when I was in the middle of it that exercising would not have been a good fit for me. But I know that's not the case for everybody. So if you don't suffer from anxiety or from nausea with your adrenaline, then I would absolutely, recommend trying to exercise in the middle of it, because you're just sort of kicking it in the face and you're saying, all right, you're going to give me adrenaline. I'm going to use it and I'm going to pump out this workout. I know that that's helped for a lot of people. So, but just remember that because it's you sending a message in your brain to your body to create adrenaline that you don't actually need, that you can just tell your body, like I said, cut off the message. I don't need that adrenaline. Thanks anyway, brain. I appreciate you trying to take care of me. I don't need it. And the awesome part about that is that adrenaline in your body that you don't need can metabolize immediately. And this was one of this epiphanies that I had when I was talking to my doctor, because even if I would sort of calm down from having all the adrenaline at night, and it would be like a couple hours after it had started and I had, tried to distract myself with TV or breathing techniques or whatever it may be, I would still feel it and I would still be like, okay, well, once it started, the night is ruined because I know I'm going to feel this way. I'm going to be completely miserable for the next couple hours because that's just how it happened for me. And I didn't realize, I thought that going to bed and waking up was the only thing that would make it go away. And then I realized through this epiphany that I could metabolize that adrenaline. My body can metabolize it immediately. So once you normalize it to realize, okay, it's just adrenaline that I don't need. And then you realize that you are in control of metabolizing it, meaning it just gets absorbed into your body and you don't feel the symptoms of it anymore. Immediately, that needs to empower you. And you need to be empowered over this symptom of the adrenaline. I don't want to say that it's a disease, or a disorder or anything like that. Not that it's not, but because that makes it this big scary thing that makes it feel like you can't overcome it. But once you realize that all it is adrenaline that you can make stop in your head and in your body whenever you have the strength and the empowerment to do so, that is such a freeing feeling. When I really, because I'm a little bit of a control freak, so when I realized hey, I can actually fix this right now in my own head, and because I'm super stubborn, I was like, no, I don't need this adrenaline. I'm not going to deal with this. This isn't going to ruin the night. I'm going to pull my SHIT together right now, and then I'm going to go back out there and I'm going to enjoy the rest of my evening. And once you sort of stand up to the bully of adrenaline in your mind and in your body, then it's not this big scary thing anymore, and it can go away immediately. And then this is what starts to happen next. So then it starts to subside a little bit. You start to think, okay, well, my heart isn't beating as fast. As soon as you feel a minute bit of let up from your symptoms, whether it's you're not as nauseous or you're not as hot or you're not sweating as much or you don't feel as anxious or the heart palpitations, whatever it may be, once you feel the ounce of let up, you need to own that and realize, boom, I just did it. I just started metabolizing this feeling in my body. And then it becomes the snowball effect in the right direction. Because right now, it's probably snowballing in the wrong direction. You're probably, oh no, I feel it. What's going to happen? I'm not going to be able to go to this. What if I get sick? Blah, blah, blah. It's snowballing in the wrong direction. So once you have empowered yourself with this knowledge of understanding the adrenaline that you can metabolize yourself is all that you're feeling, then you can push it to snowball in the right direction. And once you start feeling the adrenaline going away, once you start feeling, okay, I'm not as, my heart isn't beating as hard, I feel a little bit normal, then you need to own that. You need to say, okay, so now the next thing I want to do is to control it so that my nausea goes away, or so that my neck doesn't feel as hot, or whatever it may be. So one of the things, so then you just attack each symptom at once. You are the one in control. Do not let your body take over you. You are in control of your body. It is amazing how much of what happens and what you feel in your body is based on what you eat and what you think in your head, and exercising, of course. Those three things are some of the biggest factors of how you feel on a daily basis. So I beg of you, once you start to feel a little bit of a let up, once you've owned that, like, no, I don't need the adrenaline, I'm good, and you start planning out how you're going to spend the rest of the evening, whether that's laying in bed watching Netflix or going back out to a party, whatever it may be, like, or going back to work, whatever, you know, going out of the work bathroom and back into your office, wherever you are when this is happening, when you are making this happen, not when it's happening to you. It doesn't happen to you. You make it happen through your own thoughts. Wherever you are, you attack one symptom at a time. You are in complete control over this. I promise you. And that was completely foreign to me. I was like, no, there's no way that I can actually control this. Don't patronize me. This is horrible. This is happening to me. No, and believe me, I felt the same way, but I promise you, you need to empower yourself to realize that you are in complete control of this. You don't need to do all of these, you know, crazy physical things or special teas or herbal relaxation, you know, scents and all that stuff. Just attack it in your mind and you will attack this thing altogether. So once you start to feel a little let up in one of your symptoms, own it. Yes, I owned it. I just metabolized it. And then start talking yourself through it. Yes, this is great. Look, I feel a little bit better. Look, 10 seconds has gone by and I feel better. This is awesome. And then you start planning the rest of your night, or you start planning the rest of your day as if this never happened to begin with, because then your mind is focusing on something else. You are empowering yourself to realize that you are overcoming this. Currently, right now, you are overcoming this. And in a few days, weeks, months, however long, you are never going to feel that feeling ever again. And it's going to be because you have stopped it in your own mind and in your own body, not because of some external stuff, but because you have learned to harness the empowerment of realizing that you are creating it. So just as easily as you create it, you can stop it. It might take some time. It might not go away the first time. It probably took me a couple weeks to a couple months, but they were getting significantly fewer. I mean, I was having that experience every single day for a while. And then it happened once a week. And then it was maybe once a month. And then I went like 6 months. And then, you know, I went a year. And now it's probably been almost 4 years since I've even remotely felt that feeling. And sometimes when I'm laying in bed and I have an early flight, that thought will come into my mind like, that would really suck if I were to have to go through that again. And I might feel like a pinch of adrenaline in my chest. And I'm like, I don't need to worry about it because I know how to fix it, and I'll stop it. And even if it does start, I'll stop it. No big deal. And that's another thing, is that whole anticipatory thing. If you're, say, going to an event, and one reason I wanted to create this video right now is because we're embarking upon a very big week for Beachbody coaches, which is our week of our summit, which is our annual conference for coaches in Nashville. And I know that there are a lot of coaches on our team who struggle really badly with anxiety. And I know that these big events, it can be very overwhelming, especially if you have a team coming with you, and you can be stressed about, you know, the logistics of it all, and traveling and making it there and pleasing everybody and everybody having a good time and getting everything they can out of it. And I know a lot of leaders who are struggling with this. And so that's why I thought it was timely, and being here at Smith Mountain Lake with this beautiful backdrop, to share this experience with you and share how I've overcome it. So just when you are preparing for something that would typically be a trigger for you, typically make you worry, or something that you're worried about potentially having adrenaline at some moment in the future because of this event that's, you know, coming up, whatever it is. It could be a wedding, it could be a birthday party, it could be a class reunion, work conference, whatever it may be. Just realize ahead of time, like, okay, so what if I start to feel adrenaline? Then I'll stop it because I know that I can. So once you just like play it down and you stop letting this adrenaline be this bully in your life, it's bullying you. It is literally taking the joy from your life. You need to stand up to this bully and tell it, no, you're my adrenaline. I can control you. I can tell you when I need you and when I don't. So when you're doing this big Beachbody super workout with, you know, 25,000 other people, yeah, sure, give me adrenaline. But when I'm just sitting in the stands, or when I'm doing a team meet and greet, or I'm going to an interview, or getting ready for a wedding, or whatever it may be, you don't need it then. So just prepare yourself ahead of time to not be stressed about it, to not let it overwhelm you and steal your joy. Don't let it steal your joy anymore, because you are in complete control over it, I promise you. So before one of these events, I want you to say, okay, own it. So you'll have practiced before that. You will tell yourself to not stress about it. And if you start to feel it, then you can metabolize it. You can make it go away immediately. So a couple of key points to reiterate. So stop calling it an anxiety attack or a panic attack. It's not an attack. It's not something that's happening to you. You are creating it. It is adrenaline that you don't need. Cut off the signal. You're creating it in your own head. It's just a biological response that your body thinks that you need because you're freaking out about something in your mind. So, and again, your trigger could be something really big or really small. One time, since alcohol was my trigger, I was watching a movie of somebody drinking and getting drunk, and I started to feel adrenaline from that just because I was watching something else in bed on like a Thursday night. So don't minimize what your triggers can be, and own it, and just realize that you can cut off that fight or flight response. You can cut off that adrenaline that you don't need. And remember, since you're creating it in your head, you can also stop it in your head immediately. You can make your body metabolize it as soon as you own the fact that it's not something that's happening to you, and you are in complete control of when it starts and when it ends. It doesn't have to be an hour. It doesn't have to be after you throw up. It doesn't have to be after you go to the ER and get some this. It doesn't have to be after you have some Xanax or after you turn the fan on. Even once you start to feel it creeping in, resist the urge to do the things that you normally do when you're starting to feel it. When I was starting to feel it, I would prop up my pillows because I was nauseous. I would turn on the fan so that I could get some air. I would turn on a certain show. And then those were all things that were actually enabling it, because those were my anxiety fixer things. They don't work. So resist the urge to get up and do that. Feel it. Let yourself feel it. Sometimes I would even lay there and I would just lay and feel it, to purposely be like, okay, what's the worst that could happen? I'm getting hot. Okay. I'm feeling heart, palpitations, but I know I'm not dying. I know I'm not having a heart attack. So let me just feel it. Let me just feel my heart beating hard in my chest. Let me just feel the back of my neck sweating. Just feel it. What's the big deal? It happened a million times before. It's probably going to happen a few more times. I'm just going to let myself feel it. I'm going to let myself be hot. I'm going to let myself feel nauseous. Okay. I'm creating it. And once you allow yourself to sort of feel it and own it without panicking about it, without worrying, oh no, I got to turn the fan on and I got to get the glass of water and I got to hold an ice back to my neck, or whatever that you do, because we all have our own things, resist the urge to do that. And maybe wait until you've practiced this a couple times. Resist the urge to start worrying, because even now, sometimes if I feel like the tiniest twinge of oh, that would really stink, and I'll feel like a pang in my chest, I'm like, all right. So even if I do feel that, no big deal, I'll just make it go away. And once you just minimize this big scary thing of anxiety disorder that you have that's controlling your life, once you just minimize it and realize, yo, bro, I got this, it won't be a big issue. The only power that a bully has is when you let it have power over you. If you stand up to a bully, a lot of times it's a big freaking coward itself. And that is what adrenaline is. You can tell that bully to go home. And I guarantee you can learn how to do this. You can teach yourself how to do these Jedi mind tricks yourself. So since you can create it in your head, you can stop it in your head. You can stop those symptoms in your body immediately. You can metabolize it immediately. You just have to remember that you are the one who's in control. You started it. I know that's hard to wrap your mind around in the beginning, but you started it in your head from some trigger, and you can stop it just as easily. So once you own that, and you stand up to your bully of adrenaline that you don't need, then you can overcome this horrible thing that's been stealing your joy. So thank you for listening. I know this ran kind of long, but I know what a thief that this thing can be. I know what a bully it can be. I know how it can steal your joy, and how it can make you go to bed early and make you say no to events that you want to go to. And it can make you dread things like Coach Summit, which is such an amazing opportunity to go to, when you should be embracing it and being excited for it. And nervousness is different than dreading something because you're afraid of having that adrenaline. So thank you for listening. Comment below if you have any questions, or if you want to chat about anything else. I'm happy to talk about this at any length. Years ago, having this conversation with you, talking about this in the depth that I've just talked to you about it in, would have thrown me for a loop. I would have gone through it myself just talking about it with you. But I can honestly say I don't feel a twinge of worry or adrenaline or anything about it, talking about it with you guys right now, because I've overcome it because of weeks, months, years of practicing to normalize this feeling that you're feeling. So don't be afraid of it. There are so many people that deal with this. And I think if we can just empower you to realize that you are in control of it, that it can help you overcome this thing that's stealing your joy. So thanks again for listening. Let me know if you have any questions. Bye, guys.